Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed this episode, because I already know by chatting with him before we came on, his voice is going to entice you to listen and to want to read more. Thane, he is the author of The Buddhist CEO, and we're here to talk about the difficulty of following our beliefs in this day and age. So, Thane, tell us a little about yourself before we start talking about your book.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, Melissa, for inviting me on today. I hope my accent lives up to the billing you just gave it. So, I hope all the American audience can understand me. My name is Thane Lawrie, and I live in Scotland. I've lived in Scotland all my life. As Melissa said, I'm the author of a book called The Buddhist CEO. I was a CEO myself for many years. For 7 years, I was the CEO of a large not-for-profit organisation in Scotland, and I was able to lead that quite successfully. And in 6 of my 7 years in charge, the company was ranked to the top 100 companies to work for in the UK. I've also been a practicing Buddhist for about 25 years, and I hope that made me well placed to write a book called The Buddhist CEO. I'm married, 2 children. They're 25 and 19 now, and I just have a real love for the outdoors, a love for Scotland, a love for America as well. I've been fortunate to visit America twice in my life and enjoyed every moment of that. So looking forward to a conversation today, Melissa. So thanks for asking me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. Now I have to know, you said you visited America twice. Where have you visited?
Well, the first time I visited California, so I was in San Francisco, and I also did a lot of hiking in the Sierra Nevadas. In fact, I actually climbed Mount Whitney, which is the highest mountain in the lower 48 states. I've also been to New York and Miami.
So you've not been to any like the rural parts of the United States. You've only been to like the big cities.
Well, saw some of the rural parts of California, I suppose, in the Sierra Nevadas. But yes, I suppose mostly the tourist spots. But I've always found America a fascinating country. A lot of people in Scotland and across the UK would probably see America as being one of the countries that are the closest to, if not the closest to, after the same language, different accents, but same language. And I've always really enjoyed America, and I hope to go back many times.
Well, I've hoped to one day visit Scotland. I think a lot of people, when they think Scotland, they think Outlander as well. Yeah. So
I hear that a lot, yes.
So let's talk about Buddhism. You said you've been a practicing Buddhist for 20 years. How did you get interested in that? What made you decide to say, okay, I'm going to do this with my life?
Yeah, I mean, there was something I think maybe just in me from a young age that was interested in religions in general, just living a peaceful spiritual life. And for some reason, although I still am interested in all religions, Buddhism just always stuck out that little bit more for me. It was just something about the practice of meditation, maybe even the image of the Buddha himself, just looking very peaceful. I was always drawn to that, even in my teens. But I wouldn't necessarily have called myself a Buddhist until I was in my mid-20s. And it was really a chance meeting with a Buddhist monk who came to I held a meeting in my local city. And I went along, and I was just absolutely struck by how he conducted himself and just what he said, and just the peaceful manner, the way he described life and how it could be lived. And almost from that moment on, I've never looked back. I felt so enthused by what he had to say, and I started getting into the Buddhist practice, meditating and practicing mindfulness, and going on retreat to a monastery where the monks live, and just found it a really nice way to live. So yeah.
Was there any pushback when you first decided, okay, I'm going to be a Buddhist? Was there pushback from people?
It's funny, not really, but internally I felt, it took me a few years to sort of come to terms with actually calling myself a Buddhist. And it was almost like a coming out, I think, coming out as a Buddhist, because the UK in particular, so Scotland's part of the UK, as you know, and it's quite a secular country. I mean, Christianity would be the main religion, but quite often people keep the religion to themselves and they don't talk about it much. But I found myself maybe going to the monastery for a retreat and just telling people I was going somewhere. I didn't actually say where I was going. But eventually I thought, well, this is quite important to me and I really enjoy this. And there's no reason to hide it any longer. So I came out and started telling people after a few years that I actually felt I was a Buddhist and I was living this way. But then, generally people were fairly accepting of that and just seemed to be okay. So, I didn't have any kickback, but it took me a while to build up that courage to go tell people I'm a Buddhist.
Why do you think it took you a while?
Interesting question. I suppose maybe friends and family probably just knew me as somebody who wasn't necessarily religious, if you like. I think maybe just that change in me, I knew might be viewed, or I thought might be viewed by other people as being maybe even slightly odd or slightly different. I suppose maybe there was an internal fear around that. If I'm, not that I thought people would do anything bad to me, just that sort of social status. Maybe what would people think? And I think we could naturally, our minds can sort of jump to these sort of fears and doubts that still linger in people, certainly my mind at times. And it took a little while to pluck up that courage, but I think maybe looking back, I was silly now, but because people were quite accepting of it. But just maybe that fear of just saying that I'm doing something different here and what would people think? But there was no reason to actually feel that way, because in reality, people were welcoming of it. But it did take a little bit of a step to sort of come out and say it's what I'm doing, it's who I am now, and what I'm doing with my life.
Has anybody in your family converted with you, or is it just you?
No, just me. My wife would probably regard herself as a spiritual person, interested in many sort of aspects of spirituality and religion, without necessarily following a particular one. But she's very respectful of me practicing Buddhism, as are my children. But they have a semi-interest in it, and they're always interested in what I'm doing. But no, they haven't actually. None of them have actually become a Buddhist. And in many ways, there's not necessarily really a notion of conversion so much in Buddhism that I don't have a need to sort of try and convert other people. Although I'm quite happy to tell people about Buddhism, what it's done for my life, and I think you could even incorporate parts of Buddhist life or practice into your life and be a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, or a Buddhist, or an atheist, as aspects of this life can be lived and hopefully make people happier, whether they call themselves a Buddhist or not. And there's a lot of literature out there now. There's modern psychology and a lot of the leadership kind of stuff talking about being mindful and be present to our life. And much of that's drawn from Buddhism. They just drop the name, and I'm comfortable with that. I think that can help people, and whether it's come from Buddhism or not doesn't really matter. What ultimately matters is that people can become more happy in themselves and more grounded.
That is so true. Now, tell us exactly what Buddhism is, because I know there's a lot of listeners that all they think of when they think of Buddha is they think the statue, and they think a lot of people may think it's a cult. I'm just going to put it out there. And a lot of people may think that it's something negative, but it's not. It's actually something very beautiful.
Yeah, I hope so. It's a very peaceful way of life, and it shouldn't be a threat to anybody else's views or beliefs. And I actually run a local Buddhist group here. I do it as a volunteer in my local area, and people of all religions are welcome to come. And there's no attempt to try and convert them. In fact, if somebody comes along from another religion and they want to change, I usually try and talk them out of it. So, look, you've practiced your way for many years. Why would you want to change? So it's a very peaceful way of life. I suppose at its heart is that, as I believe, certainly in the type of Buddhism I follow, are slightly different schools, but essentially they're all teaching the same thing. But in everybody, there is the Buddha nature. Some people might call it God or spirit, but we often use the term Buddha nature. Something that's in us that is deeper than the surface Thane or the surface Melissa, or the job I do, the person I think I am. There's some deeper quality to us that is just naturally more grounded, naturally peaceful, naturally has an element of wisdom to it. And Buddhism sort of teaches that we can touch upon this aspect of our life and try and practice certain practices that help us touch upon that more often. More sort of meditating allows us to sort of still our mind to some degree and touch that inner sort of Buddha nature or sense of well-being, and being mindful and present to our life. The Buddha sort of taught that we're often living in the future or the past, so we're thinking about what's to come, the holiday we're going to have, or the difficult meeting, or the conversation we're going to have, what we're having for our tea tonight, or thinking of the past. Why did somebody say that? Why did that happen? Whereas the Buddha said happiness or an enlightened life is actually found here and now, being fully present to your life. So speaking to you, am I fully present and giving myself to this conversation? Yeah. Am I fully present to making my tea, eating my tea, washing my dishes, cleaning my house, and everyday tasks? And I've certainly found the more I'm in the moment, the more I'm present to what I'm doing, the more peaceful I am. So really, I would say Buddhism is allowing us to sort of ground ourselves in daily life and find happiness and contentment in just where we are. Our true home is where we are at any moment, and that can be practiced by Buddhists, but hopefully, it could really add to any person's life. I hope, whatever the religion or of no religion, it's just a nice way to live. And it certainly made me a perfect person by any means. My wife would roll her eyes and say, definitely not. But it's hopefully made me feel a better person in myself. I feel more happy, feel more content, not perfect in any way. I just feel there's a natural groundedness in life by following a life where meditation and mindfulness is something I do on a daily basis.
So what made you decide to write the Buddhist CEO?
The Buddhist CEO, in many ways, I hope other people could identify with it who aren't Buddhists. Somebody reading it, say, who's a Christian, could quite easily see how it could be the Christian CEO or the Hindu CEO or the Muslim CEO, or even just a moral person CEO who doesn't have a religion. And by that, I mean that I think there's so many people out there struggling with modern life, struggling with the modern world, struggling with the modern workplace. They may be very successful people, but the question, how hard they have to work, the number of hours they have to work, and maybe they feel they're caught up in something's described as the rat race. Have more money, have a bigger house, have a better holiday. And I do some of these things myself. I'm not saying they're all bad. These things, wanting to live somewhere nice and enjoy a nice life is a good thing. But sometimes we can get caught up in this, and very much, and I think particularly in the Western world, a lot of focus is put on the amount of work we do and what we produce, rather than who we are and how we live and how we are as a human being and how we help other people. And I feel it's rarely written about that from the perspective of somebody, how they cope with the modern world, living from the book's main character is a Buddhist. But I think there's a lot of people out there trying to be good people, trying to follow their own religion or their own spiritual belief or moral belief. And I find so many people just struggle with that. And I wanted to write this story about that struggle, about how people could maybe make them feel they're not alone, that there is somebody else out there, the main character, who is out there trying to do good in work, even at a very senior level. I try to bring morals into it. But I also wanted to try and show just how difficult that can be. In the book, as you know, the main character on the face of it is very successful, but internally there's a lot of doubts, and he also faces some real extreme challenges from difficult people and difficult colleagues in the workplace, and how he overcomes that. So I just felt nobody or not many people had written about this story, which I feel is actually experienced by millions of people in the Western world or the whole world on a daily basis. And I just thought it would be an interesting thing to write about, maybe make people think.
And honestly, it reads like a memoir. I mean, honestly, I had to look and I was like, wait a second, did he write this? Is he what? And I had to look back to make sure that wasn't you that you were talking about in the story, because it really reads like a memoir. It reads like it's somebody telling the story that's actually happened in their life.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that. I mean, it is heavily based on my own life, but I felt early on that I could have written a memoir, but I didn't think that was fair on people who I'd worked with or the companies I'd worked for, as I've mentioned. So I wanted to create a fictional character and a fictional storyline, and obviously some of it is taken from my life, but not at all in the situations and the people that are described in the book and the companies described in the book aren't actually real. For the monastery where the main character goes to, Throssellhold, is a real monastery that I have gone to, but the monks I describe in the monastery aren't real monks and things like that. So in many ways, it was written as I suppose, a fictional memoir in many ways. I wanted to read like that. You're in somebody's head when they were making difficult decisions. What were they thinking? Particularly the CEO. That's a mindset or a mind that people don't often get into. But what I found was in my own life was when I worked as a CEO, I got to know many other CEOs or senior people or people that held down senior jobs. And what I found was, sometimes I think they can be portrayed as the bad people or, out to get people. But the people I met were all actually highly moral and highly motivated, wanted to do a really good job for the company, for themselves and for their customers, and genuinely wanted to run a business properly. I treat people well and do the best they could. But what I found was they all had doubts. They're all human beings at the end of the day. And many of the CEOs I met who were maybe very successful, once I got to know them really well, I think some of them actually all struggled with maybe a minor level of anxiety or stress, or there was always something bubbling away and made me question just how good is it to live this way, and I often found that they had that tension, that they all wanted to be moral people. Some of them had their own religion, but often Christianity, and my good friends are Christians, for example. And they had that tension too, do you sack somebody if you're a Christian or a Buddhist, Besides as a CEO, you have to, but that conflict's on their mind about how to resolve these things, and I just thought it was a fascinating subject to write about, and hopefully would relate to anybody who's really worked, whether they're the boss or not, is almost always had a difficult character or found a decision the company has taken to be, in their mind, to be a difficult decision or a wrong decision, and they've got to reconcile that. So I just felt it was something worth writing about.
So we need to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, you're going to read a section of the Buddhist CEO, correct?
Yes, I'd love to.
All right, here we go.
People welcomed me, and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. Feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
And we are back chatting with Thane. And he wrote the book, The Buddhist CEO. And before break, I asked him if he would read a section of the book. So it's all yours, Thane.
Thank you very much. Just to say before I read, this is just a chapter 4 of the book. I've just selected 4 pages, which maybe was quite a good selection because it sums up what we've talked about already, Melissa, in terms of why the main character fell in love with Buddhism. And at this point in the book, he's reflecting about his life as a busy chief executive and the life he loves, the Buddhist life he loves. So if there are some Japanese sounding names, they're just names of famous Buddhists that he's talking about. So hopefully this gives a flavour of why the main character sort of fell in love with Buddhism and loved that way of life. Here goes. Dogen himself went on a very arduous and dangerous journey across the sea to China, quite an undertaking in the 13th century, to visit a Chan monastery that would have a profound effect upon him. He was struck with the care and attention the monks put into preparing the food for the temple. He was also struck by the fact that the head cook was a senior monk, often only outranked in seniority by the abbot of the monastery. He inquired into why this was, and was told that preparing food was an important aspect of Buddhist training, and that the cooking of food was an expression of the Buddhist practice, as well as an offering to those who eat the food which has been prepared. He was so impressed that he went on to write an important text within the Soto Zen Buddhist tradition called the Tenzo Kyokan, which translates as instructions for the Zen cook. In his instructions, he writes movingly and inspirationally about how to prepare food. Dogen writes, when you prepare food, never view the ingredients from some commonly held perspective, nor think about them only with your emotions. Maintain an attitude that tries to build great temples from ordinary greens, that expounds the Buddha Dharma through the most vital activity. He also writes, treat utensils such as tongs and ladles and all other implements and ingredients with equal respect. Handle all things with sincerity, picking them up and putting them down with sincerity. I still read this scripture regularly. At first glance, it is perhaps only a list of procedures to be followed whilst preparing food. For me, though, it goes much deeper, and the instructions are really about how to cook your own life. It is very much the Buddhist way to be present to your life, be grateful, and treat the ingredients with respect. Whether it be a soup made with the finest ingredients or one with vegetables that do not look so good, we should use and eat the ingredients with dignity and respect. As in life, there are aspects of our job, family life, friends, and even Buddhist practice that we find more agreeable than others. But if we practice well and cook our life with care, approaching all these aspects of life in a manner that is compassionate, accepting, and grounded, enlightened action is revealed to us in the most mundane of tasks. This is what Dogen is encouraging us to do in his instructions for the Zen cook. I fell in love with these forms and practices. They took hold of me with such a force and sincerity that surprised me. Although Beth loves me deeply, she and the boys could see that something had changed in me. Many of these changes were positive. I think we all had to adjust to them. When I clicked with Buddhist practice, my life changed overnight. The world I stepped into every morning when I left the house suddenly felt like a completely different place, a whole new world of gratitude, peace, contentment, joy, and beauty. Simple daily tasks such as cleaning the house, cooking a meal, shopping, drinking tea, or putting away clothes became acts of joy when done mindfully. I tried to do these daily chores with a contemplative mind, being fully present to each activity. I was cooking, as I selected the ingredients in the fridge or cupboard, I'd be aware of the cold touch of the refrigerator door when I opened it. I'd be aware of the smells coming from the fridge before selecting my ingredients. Be aware of the touch, colour, and feel of the vegetables and sauces as I picked them up. I'd wash them carefully before preparing them. As I cut or peeled my ingredients, I'd be aware of the nice blade making the cut, how hard or softly I had to push to make the cut. When stirring the ingredients and adding spices and sauces, I'd be fully aware of the texture of the wooden spoon in my hand, the smells, the stirring action. I'd select spices, herbs, and sauces, careful to add the right amounts to make the meal as tasty and wholesome as possible. I'd be sure to cook the meal as well as I could, not undercooking or overcooking. I had carried out these daily tasks all my adult life, indifferent to them. I saw them as neither positive nor negative acts, just things that had to be done. Over the years, I usually rushed through my chores, thinking about what had happened earlier that day or where I was going that evening. Buddhist practice showed me that these seemingly mundane acts could become expressions of enlightenment. When I found this new way of living, I could hardly believe how grounded and peaceful I felt. The world felt like it had changed forever, and it had. Meditating brought a different quality to my days. I lived in the moment more. I noticed the little things more, became more aware of the colour of the sky, the birds singing, small daily kindnesses that are out there, the old lady holding the door open for me, a car stopping to let me cross the road when it's busy. Over time, I became more attuned to other people, their kindness, but also their troubles, the heaviness some people carry around with them, the deep sadness in others. I felt more compassionate overall. In no way was I a perfect being, but I felt great and much more compassionate with myself and others. I also loved the look and feel of my Zendo and all things Buddhist, the smell of the incense, the altar with the Buddha, always sitting there as a reminder of what's possible. My meditation mat, which made kneeling to meditate a bit more bearable. My meditation bench, handmade by the monks at Throstle Hole. The atmosphere of the Zendo, which I only used for meditation, became still and quiet, almost as if the intention of my meditation and the peacefulness of the Buddha statue had altered the feel of the room. I fell in love with the Buddhist life, and I even had my own Buddhist dog always by my side. There are times when it's harder than others, nights where I haven't slept well, and it's a struggle to get up, Days when I'm really stressed with work and my mind never stops chattering during meditation. But I love the discipline of the practice. It encourages us to keep sitting in meditation every day, despite the challenges of life. Over time, you realize that the benefits of this gentle practice are deep and profound. I recognize there's an irony here. The heart of Zen Buddhist practice is the teaching of not clinging to ideas or things. The Buddha taught that through clinging to ideas of who we are or to material things, we lose sight of our true nature. But I was in a way clinging to the practice. I'd fallen in love with its forms and now strongly identified as a Buddhist. I try to distance myself from these internal thoughts. Buddhism points to a deeper reality that goes beyond these forms and concepts of being Buddhist. Buddhism is just another word, a form, a vehicle to help us realize the truth. But it's not the truth itself. This is an important teaching.
Wow.
I hope that was okay.
Yes, that was perfect.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, I actually wrote down Buddhist practice shows me the seemingly mundane acts can be expressions of enlightenment. I told you that was probably going to be one thing that you were going to read that was going to come out of what I
That's
read.
amazing.
So let's talk about that particular one, about how the mundane acts can be expressions of enlightenment. So let's talk about that in the Buddhist tradition.
Well, that really struck me quite early on in Buddhism. In the book, I mentioned Throstle Hole there. It's an actual monastery in northern England, just south of Scotland, and I visit that 2 or 3 times a year when I can. And on retreat, there's a lot of meditation, but in the Zen tradition in particular, which just kind of comes from Japan, they have 2 or 3 periods a day where you do what they call working meditation, and the working meditation is seen as important as the sort of sitting meditation. And you may be given jobs to cut and wash vegetables in the kitchen. I've planted trees, I've cut grass, I've weeded gardens, I've done all sorts of jobs. But the idea being that you approach that in the same way as your meditation. So work has always been quite an important part. Not overwork, but just gentle work. And something about that I found really uplifting. One, the monastery would try and do things in silence, but it's not an absolute silence. You can ask for help or clarify what you're doing, etc. What I find just working with other people, almost in a rhythmic, gentle fashion, there's no ridicule. We know we're just trying to work together. We're trying to produce, we're trying to make the monastery look better or our home look better. There's something about that really struck me, and this idea that everything has a value, and everything in life has a value, and looking after our house isn't something to be rushed through, or those jobs. I was cleaning toilets quite a lot in the monastery, and it was quite nice when I was a CEO in particular. Just to have a simple job to do rather than sort of thinking all the time. And it's about just saying everything has a value, and enlightenment isn't to be found in the future on a sort of mystical mountain top. It's to be found here, sort of in daily tasks. And what I found is when you put that into practice, and how we do it is, just say you're doing your dishes. Like in meditation, you start thinking about things. You can passionately bring yourself back to meditating, or you can passionately bring yourself back to washing the dishes or making the food. Your mind starts wandering again. You bring yourself back to what you're doing. That may happen a lot of times because minds think it's just what they do. Even monks that have sat in monasteries for many years still say their mind starts thinking about things. And some of this just compassionate, bringing ourselves back, never beating ourselves up. What we're doing seems to then sort of flow into life. So when somebody annoys us, we're away at the act. Like we've done in meditation, we can bring ourselves back to the present. We don't necessarily become perfect beings, we become more enlightened action and becomes more possible. Maybe a more skillful response comes more often than an unskillful response. And so I find that generally it's very much to know that so whatever we're doing has a value to it. It doesn't have to be something special we're doing, but just living our daily lives is an expression of something good, and taking care of our house, whether it's a brand new house, or an old house, or an in-between house, whether our kitchen's old, modern, or new. I always admire amongst our kitchen is, this is very old, but it's very well, they wash it down at night, and it's not over the top either. Just everything's cared for. They don't change things unless they have to. If it's broken, they make things last. And just something about that attitude just brings that. If you bring that into your life in some way, whatever your religious background, it brings a peacefulness to it, and you can find that in mundane things. You don't need to be on a retreat. You don't need to be somewhere special. You can be standing at your kitchen doing the dishes. And certainly a lot of the Soto Zen approach is very much that we can find enlightened action here and now what we're doing.
When you were writing this book, how much of research did you do? Because obviously you said you go to the monastery a couple of times a year. You obviously had to research a little bit before you decided to become a Buddhist. So how much more did you research?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, because I enjoy Buddhism so much, I've read a lot about it. So when I had to sometimes go back when I was quoting certain figures, like just to make sure what I was saying was correct. So thankfully, I have quite a lot of Buddhist books in the house, and there's so much now on the internet. So yeah, I did a bit more research, but it was quite often I was checking back up on things I thought I knew, just double check that I was actually explaining it correctly. So yeah, there's a little bit of research in there. But I suppose if you think about my 25 years prior to writing the book, or 20 odd years, I suppose there's a lot of research going on in my life I was able to draw upon. And I've got quite a big, well, I feel like quite a lot of Buddhist books upstairs, so in my personal library, so I was able to draw upon that. But yeah, certainly if I was quoting historical facts or what figures had said, I was always very careful to ensure that I said the correct thing.
Because you did say right before you read the passage that there was going to be a lot of unknown words because it's Japanese people are Buddhists, famous Buddhists that you wanted to make sure that you included in the book. How important was that to you to include that in the book?
It was important to me, actually, and that's an interesting question. And people might say, why? Why is that important? I think there is a lot of good things about modern society. I also think there's a lot of wisdom in the past. In all traditions, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, I read stuff from all different religions, and I think they all point to the same truth. In fact, I think if you find somebody who's truly practicing a religion, whatever it is, I don't see Buddhism as better than any other religion. I see it as equal to them, but I see it as equal and not above them either. I think if you meet a Christian or you meet a Hindu or a Muslim or a Buddhist or even just a moral atheist who's really trying to live a good life, I think pretty much we come to the same place. We are slightly more grounded, we're slightly more compassionate, we're slightly more content. Happy to say we're not perfect, but it has this, I just think it almost brings you to that same sort of place. But I do think it's worth pointing out to people in the modern world that there's some of these ancient practices, whatever one you choose, there's a lot of wisdom in them. I think maybe in a lot of modern society that can be dismissed. And I think there's a lot in that. And I think there's a lot in monasticism, which is probably really out there for a lot of people. So the joy I find of going to the monastery, and I'm sure I would find the same in a Christian or another type of monastery, that there's something about having the opportunity to be in silence, or a lot of silence in a week. The most modern people will never ever get the chance to experience. I think that's a real shame. If you look at this kind of advice pages and magazines and, in a modern culture, there's very little about being silent. There's very little about being in the moment. There's very little about being grounded. It's what a lot of these ancient kind of teachers in different religions talked about. So I was quite keen to bring some of that into the modern day, just to sort of say, look, yes, they were writing. Well, I quoted a guy called Dogen, the great master Dogen. He was seen as the founder of the school of Buddhism that I follow. But and you can say that in other religions can point to great teachers in their tradition that go back 2,000 years or certainly hundreds of years. I don't think we should dismiss these people and what they wrote. I think they're worth listening to. Yes, maybe adapt it for our modern lives, but I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can be tapped into from the past.
Now, take me through when you wrote The Buddhist CEO from start to finish. How long did it take you to write it? And then how long did it take you to finally get someone to publish it and go through the whole steps?
Yeah, the answer, I always laugh when somebody asks me that question. The answer to that is slightly complicated. But I started writing it, must have been about 2018, while I was still working as a CEO. And I would write so much of it in the morning, generally speaking. I gave myself, or got up early, I would meditate, and I would write. I only had so much time, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And I would write maybe 300 to 500 words. Generally, that's what I did, try to do that every day, and eventually it built up. But as the main character in the book, the pressure and stress of the job, he actually became a little bit unwell. Well, it actually happened to me as well. And I actually had to retire from the CEO role early. I'm only sort of 50 years old. I'm still involved with that company. I'm still the vice chairman of the company. I'm still heavily involved with them, which I really appreciate them doing. They treated me very well. And thankfully, 4 years later, I haven't fully recovered from that, but I'm much better. So the reason I'm telling you, I had to put the book down for a year because I was so unwell, I couldn't really focus on the writing of it. So once I felt a bit better, I started to pick it up again and finished off the last chapter or two. So if there hadn't been that year break, I think it would have taken me 6 or 7 months to do it. It was split by that year. And then I had the job of, I was really naive. Maybe I think many writers are quite naive with their first book. I've written the book, I'll finish. Now I know I was really just beginning. So yeah, I had to find a publisher, and I sent it out to many publishers. They tend to all have a general sort of submission kind of process. You sort of submit the book, and I probably sent out about, off the top of my head, 45, 50 maybe publishers in total, and I had about 3, 4, maybe 5 offers. But I actually ended up going with an American publisher, not a million miles from where you are in Virginia Beach, Kohler Books. I just felt that I just really connected with them. I'm a great believer in connecting with people. I used to be a saying in business, people do business with people. You have that connection with somebody, you like to do something with them. But John Kohler, who owns Kohler Books, is a real character. I don't think you mind me saying that. I mean that in the nicest way. And he spent a bit of time with me, a few Zoom calls, and how much he wanted to publish the book, and made me feel so welcome in a way that others didn't. They didn't make me feel welcome, but they didn't make me feel as welcome as Kohler Books. I just felt, these are the guys I want to publish it with. And even from there, you think, great, I've got a publisher, the book will be out soon. But again, it's still about, I think it was maybe 10 months after that before the book was actually published, just because they have a sort of conveyor belt of authors ahead of me in the queue sort of thing. It was an exciting process, though, because working with a professional editor, just the way they looked at the book and suggested tweaks and changes was really interesting. And even the Kohler Books do the front cover in a really interesting way. That they get my ideas and they have their own for the cover, and they have their own ideas, and then they come up with 5 options. And between us, we worked that down to 2 options, and then they put it out to a public vote and asked the public to decide what the best book is. And that was really interesting process. We got comments and feedback. So and then when it was published, and I saw the final book, it was a real joy. It was just this thing had been in my head for so long, and now it was a reality. And again, even when it was published, I was maybe look back and smile. Maybe I was slightly naive as well, that I hadn't appreciated the interest that would be in the book, which is great. But I found myself almost in a full-time job answering sort of queries and podcasts, and I've enjoyed them all. But it surprised me how busy that has been actually since the book came out, and it's been a joy. But I hadn't necessarily appreciated how much was involved in that. So it's been an exciting process, and I suppose a realization of a long-held dream to publish a book.
Now, do you think your book would have been a little bit different if you hadn't had to take that year off? You already said different as far as publishing, but do you think that, going back to what you were saying about the Buddhist practice of being present in your life, that maybe those circumstances, that you getting ill, not saying that it was meant to be or that it was a good thing, but it's maybe that's the way you were supposed to do it, that was, you were supposed to take a break because the way you were going with the book would have been a totally, completely different way than the way the book came out? Yeah,
it certainly changed the last 2 or 3 chapters in the book. Probably influenced me to write them differently. I hadn't originally planned to end the book necessarily in the way I had, but the illness made me reflect upon that and maybe change that. Yeah, I mean, becoming ill actually was quite difficult. I'm quite happy to talk about this. I don't feel, it's just something that happened. I think as a Buddhist, it's about being honest and being open about these things and hope other people can learn. But nobody saw that I was becoming ill, including myself. It's something just happened. Just this dizziness almost happened like this. I went from being just totally normal to be incredibly dizzy and pins and needles in parts of my body, shoulder and hands and feet. And memory was affected and brain fog. And it was quite a shock to everybody. And me just came out of the blue. But it just sort of shows you, I think, and that's one of the sort of messages of the book, that how prevalent or how unforeseen stress can be in senior positions. And even though I was, in the face of it, very successful, I had lots of ups and downs in that success, but I managed to turn a company around and make it a great success. And like I say, it was voted in the top 100 companies to work for in the UK several times. And I was a CEO, and it was so. It just shows you behind the scenes, but we're human, we're fallible, and we need to take care of ourselves and other people. And I think in leadership, the amount of people who have reached out to me since the book has been published has been quite overwhelming, actually. Almost in the number of people actually dealing with that, but also quite touching as well. That people on the face of it who are very, very successful people, and who are very successful people, have also opened up to say, when they read the book, there were certain chapters brought a tear to their eye and really made them think about their own lives and the stress that they're under or have been under, and made them think about looking after themselves a bit more. I feel that Buddhist practice, although I became ill, really helped me to deal with that. It's maybe quite hard to believe for some people. Nobody wants to become ill. And the first year I really was quite ill. I found it hard to walk more than 250 meters. I was used to hiking hills and climbing mountains and a lot of stuff. I never ever really felt down. I felt grounded. I felt possible I could get better. I just took each day as it came, and I tried to, although I was ill, I was still able to do a lot around the house. So some of the things we've talked about in terms of Buddhist practices, threw myself into mindfully doing things around the house. And over time, I think that approach has allowed me to get much better. And that's not to say I wouldn't have got better, but I think Buddhism has helped me to get better quickly. And I sort of leaned against Buddhism into that. And I also became very aware of the compassion can be out there in the world. So my company, so although I was ill, I was still there for them because there was a lot of things I knew that were in my head as a CEO. I didn't do, I'm ill, leave me alone. They only phoned me when they needed me. But even though I was quite ill, I would still occasionally go in for a meeting or be there for them to say, well, actually, I know what's happening there. This is what we need to do. So I was still there for them, and they were still there for me. And it became clear I wasn't going to get well enough, quick enough to really be back to CEO. They asked me to join the board and become the vice chairman, which I think was a huge part of my recovery because I built this company up over 7 years. I didn't really want to let it go. So I'm still the vice chairman now. It's just great to still be involved in it and still play a part in the company. I'm there tomorrow for a board meeting, and so I saw that compassion as well. They recognised I changed the company. They said they weren't going to let me down because they recognised how much I changed the company. And I suppose it maybe made me feel more humble as well, because I realised that in a good way in my life, I was the first person to help other people. An old lady was crossing the road. Hopefully I'd help her across the road, or somebody dropped their shop and I'd help them pick it up. Or, I worked in the not-for-profit sector, and the nature of our business was to try and help people. But what I never really thought about was the person at the other end, the person being helped. How do they feel? And it's great to be helped. But initially I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I'm the person that helps other people, not the person that needs help. But it took a little while to get my head into that sort of situation. I think maybe initially I wasn't a very good patient to start with. I was, oh no, I'll do it myself. And then I realized that people wanted to help me, and it was a bit of a letting go. Okay, I'm going to let people help me. And once I did, it was quite a nice feeling, actually. We can sometimes think that the world is, if you watch the news at night, there's a lot of bad things going on, and there is. But there is, being ill actually made me see just how many people are willing to stop, hold a door for you when they see you maybe struggling or a bit slower, or do things for you. And that really made me feel quite good about me, but about society.
I love that. Our time, I wish we could go on and on because I could talk to you forever, but our time is almost up. Before we talk about where people can find the book as well as where people can find you, do you have one last little nugget that you want to share with people about? It could be about Buddhism, it could be about your journey, it could be about anything.
some people say, how could you change the world? And it's very difficult to say how you could change it. I often wonder if every person took 10 minutes in the morning, 10 or 15 minutes in the morning to meditate or just sit, just be quiet, still their mind. If it goes to thinking, just bringing it back to sitting. I think that act alone may be one of the most important things that any human being could ever do, or maybe the most important thing. And it doesn't matter, it could be of any religion, and I hope I wouldn't threaten any religion. You don't have to look at it as a Buddhist practice, because I know Christians, for example, in the Bible, the desert fathers, I think they meditate in the desert and things like that. So it doesn't have to be Buddhist. It just whatever your background, start your day with meditation. And I wonder if everybody in the world did that, I wonder if the world would be a better place.
That's a good thought to leave on. Now tell people where they can find you before we talk about your book again.
Okay. You can buy my book, The Buddhist CEO, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It should be available at other sites as well, but if you go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, you'll get it there. I have links that take you to these to where you can buy the page on my website. It's my name, thanelawrie.com, which is on the screen, I think, just now. ThaneLawrie.com. I think if you just put my name, Thane Lawrie, into Google, it would come up with that as well. Now, if you're interested, there are links. I write a blog on my website. Usually do at least once or twice a month, updating people on what's happened with the book. But I also do one a month, just my thoughts on something around work from a Buddhist angle or life from a Buddhist angle. They're only 5 minutes reads, and I usually get about 500 reads a month now. People all over the world are reading them. So if you've enjoyed our conversation today and you'd like to read more, you can read them for free on my blog. And there's also links to my social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn there. And I release a daily poem. It's usually a Zen Buddhist poem on Twitter. I copy it to Facebook and Instagram. I put on one of my photographs. Again, they're all free. It's a very short poem. Twitter only allows so many characters. I do one every morning. And it goes out usually every day, 9 a.m. my time. In America, you'd wake up and it's already there. So if you enjoy the conversation, what I try and put in my poem is a bit about peace. It always has a peaceful or a hopefully inspirational quality. It's always my own poem. So if you like to follow that, feel free to look at that and follow me or have a look.
And the book again is called The Buddhist CEO. I wish I had it with me because I pulled out my iPad and left the book in the house. So do you have a picture of the book so people can see what the book looks like?
I do indeed.
It's a beautiful cover, by the way. I really love the cover.
Yeah, the guy's obviously a business. He's in a suit. He's holding a briefcase. He's looking onto the mountains, contemplating what could be. The Buddhist CEO.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story, for writing your story, first of all, for being present enough to write your story, and for sharing all these great wisdoms. I mean, we didn't hit what I had highlighted, but I have pages and pages of highlighted because I actually bought the Kindle version of it because I have the actual book, but I bought the Kindle so I could highlight it so I could keep it for later because I always pass my books on along to other people. But I actually bought the Kindle version just so that I could have the book on my Kindle so I can do the highlight version instead of highlighting in a book.
Okay, nice. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on the show. If you ever want me back on, Melissa, I just have to ask. But I genuinely have enjoyed the conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to ask me on your show. So thank you very much.
I do have a question. Do you have another book in you, or do you have anything coming up? Well,
interesting question. I've always seen the story being 2 books. So I am working on a follow-up book to The Buddhist CEO. So Hamish, the main character, all being well, his story will continue for one more book.
And then guess what? If Hamish, the book gets published, guess what? I want you back on to talk about Hamish's story as it continues.
Well, if you asked me to be on your show, it's a guarantee I'll be here. So I appreciate that you're thinking that. So let's that'll be sometime next year or the year after, but let's hope that happens.
All right. Well, I hope you have a great day. And once again, thank you, Thane, for coming on. And guys, the Buddhist CEO is a must read. It's really great. It's got a lot of depth, a lot of great information, a lot of great advice, even if you're not a Buddhist, but to being present in the daily life. And I think that's so important. We're so worried and so busy thinking about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow that we're not present about what's happening today. And so I think that's very important. So I will put on the links everywhere where you can find Thane, as well as where you can buy the book. And Thane, once again, thank you for coming on and for writing this wonderful book.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, be blessed. And most importantly, keep chatting. Bye.